What up, my friends? Welcome back to my channel. Today is one of my favorite videos, and that is a book wrap up, and we're going to be discussing all the books that I read in the month of April, and I'm even going to share with you some of the books that I plan to read in the month of May. In the month of April, I actually read 18 books total, but I will say 5 of them were part of a series, and they were like on the shorter side. They were like 125 to 150 page books. So does it really count as 18 full books? I'll let you be the judge of that. If you've never been here for one of my book wrap up videos before, I do spoiler free reviews. I do give a little summary about the book in my own words, and then just my thoughts on it. I don't have any fancy scale rating. I just let you guys know what I think about the book as I walked away from it on a scale of 1 to 5 stars. And then if it is some type of a romance book, I'll let you know what my spice factor rating is and how many peppers I think the spice was. If you end up enjoying this video and you do love book recommendations, please feel free to check me out on Instagram. I do have an entire Instagram account dedicated only to book content. It is at Cait Chapters, and on there I share book reviews as well as some templates for book content if you yourself like to share what you're currently reading or do book challenges and things like that. All right, so without further ado, let's dive into the books that I read in the month of April. We started off strong with one of my favorite authors. She released a new book called The Rule Book, and it's by Sarah Adams. This was a 5-star for me. Spice factor was a 1 out of 5. Normally, Sarah Adams is a closed-door romance girly, so what that means is generally there's just like kissing, flirting, things like that, no explicit scenes. But in this book specifically, she decided to provide one chapter with spicy scenes in it, but she lets you know what the chapter is at the beginning of the book. So it's kind of like pick your own adventure. If you want to skip over the spice, you can skip over it, but it's there if you do want to partake in it, which I thought was a really cool way to do it. So this one follows Nora, and she's a sports agent, and she's a female trying to navigate a very male-dominant industry. Her boss really believes in her and provides her an opportunity to represent an NFL player who's recently coming off of an injury. She's shocked to find out that the player agreed to work with her because it turns out it's the man whose heart she broke back in college. Okay, so here's the thing. With Sarah Adams, she writes the most amazing male lead characters, like book boyfriend material times 10. The most perfect male characters. And there's no difference in this book. The male character was amazing, but even more amazing was the female lead character. She was just a dream come true. I want to be her best friend. I want to be her. She was just so cool. She was so sure of herself. I just absolutely fell in love with her more so than anything else about this book. What I loved about her was she had insecurities, she had challenges, but she was a total force to be reckoned with. She set her standards high, she knew what she wanted, and she went for it. I just found it so refreshing in a romance novel. I, just like everybody else, love the adorable, quirky female main characters, but Nora was just like in a league of her own. She was phenomenal. I also just loved the story itself. I felt like it was a traditional like rom-com type storyline. So it's like it felt familiar, but Sarah Adams has a way of twisting it and making it a little bit different and a little bit more fresh. So I really enjoyed that part. I absolutely loved the background characters. There's like a group of football guys that were all like texting each other, pranking each other, but being a really good support. I just love how mature and honest her writing is, and it was no different in this book. Complete 5-star for me. If you're looking for a really good book to just feel good about, I would go with anything from Sarah Adams, and this one I think is one of her best that she's ever done. All right, the next book that I read was called Their Last Resort by R.S. Gray, and she is one of my favorite writers. I just feel like she's so entertaining. This book I gave a 4 out of 5 stars and 1 out of 5 on the spice. One thing I want to mention was the way I got this book, actually. R.S. Gray is on Kindle Unlimited, so if you have a Kindle Unlimited subscription, you can usually find most of her books. But this month, she was also a featured book on the First Reads program from Amazon. If you didn't know what that is, Amazon, you can go to amazon.com/firstreads, and if you're a US-based Amazon Prime consumer account, you can usually look it up, make sure you qualify, but you can usually pick out one book for free from their selection. They usually put up like 6 different books, and sometimes they even do a bonus book. So in the month of April, Their Last Resort by R.S. Gray was one of the books, and that's the one that I selected. So this one follows Paige, who's a free-spirited excursion director at a beautiful resort in Turks and Caicos, and she is trying to bump up the romance factor in her life, and she has her eyes set on a particular coworker of hers. But the assistant director of the hotel, his name is Cole, and he seems to be determined to get in her head and in her way. Okay, what I loved about this book is it's set in Turks and Caicos, and the writing was so exquisite for the detailing of the scenery that I felt like I actually got to go on vacation. I haven't been on vacation in quite some time though, so it could be an act of desperation, but I felt like the writing was really great for Turks and Caicos. So I think this would be an amazing beach read. I also love R.S. Gray because she's very witty, she's very entertaining, and she's very limited on the angst. There's not much angst in her book. So if you're looking for the type of book that you're not going to have to be super stressed while reading, R.S. Gray is a great place to start. The only reason this book wasn't a 5-star for me is because I felt like the pacing was a little weird, because it starts off as a very, very slow burn book, but then it's like the emotions and the love all of a sudden just like explode, and it just felt kind of a little bit unnatural to me. So that was the only reason why it wasn't a full 5-star. But if you're looking for something that's feel good, beach read material, I definitely recommend this one. Okay, the next book that I read was called Royally Rearranged, and this was by Emma St. Clair. This one I gave a 4.25 on the stars, 0 out of 5 on Spice, so it is a completely clean romance. And this one is like a royal romantic comedy. I was so surprised by this one because I haven't heard anybody talk about it. So this one follows Serafina, who is betrothed to her childhood best friend, and she's super excited to finally be able to announce their engagement. Well, she goes to go meet up with him and is shocked to find out that he has an American girlfriend hanging all over him. She's approached by one of his rivals, Rafe, to come up with a plan to try and get him back. Okay, so this one, I just felt like it was stinking adorable. Like I said before, it was predictable, it was cheesy, but not like cringy cheesy, just like the kind of cheesy that sometimes you need. Definitely like Hallmark level type vibes. This is not the next great American novel by any means, but it was just feel good, and sometimes you just want that like royal romantic comedy. I felt like there was a good amount of layers to this though, so it wasn't just superficial. The characters had like a lot of depth to them, and even though they were royal, like it was relatable. They were relatable, but still it felt realistic. It definitely pulled at my heartstrings reading some of the things that they were going through, even though it's like well out of the realm of something that I would ever personally experience. There was just this like underlying understanding that you go through as a reader for it. I would say the first half of the book is definitely stronger than the second half of the book, but overall, I just think this is really adorable, and if you need a feel-good type rom-com, this would be a great one to pick up. All right, the next book that I read was called Root Bound, and this is by Tara DeWitt. This one I gave a 4 out of 5 stars and 1 out of 5 on the Spice. So basically, this one follows Tate, who is blindsided by the love of her life asking her for a divorce. A couple years has gone by since that day, and she's presented with a work opportunity that ends up taking her to her estranged father's ranch. Once she gets there, one of his employees is weary of her because he assumes that she's there for the wrong reasons. Okay, this one is an incredibly slow burn. So slow. But it felt like the chemistry got to marinate because of that. I'm not usually into slow burns, but in this one, I just felt like it really built in a way that felt natural to the relationship. At the beginning of this book, Tate, I felt like was a little bit of a flat character for me. She just kind of felt like robotic almost in the way that she was moving about the book, if you will. But I think that it was probably intentional on the writer's side, because as she kind of goes through the things that she goes through in the book, she starts to really blossom, and I ended up completely loving her as a character. The reason why it was a 4-star and not higher for me is because I just felt like it's a very like every day in the life type romance. You're really just like walking through their everyday in the life on the ranch. There wasn't a lot of like suspense or deep topics or anything that fully sucked me in. They were all touched upon, but it never felt like it was dug deep enough to really like hook me in as a reader. I would say though, if you happen to be a fan of the show Yellowstone, there's definitely some Yellowstone vibes to it because it's set in like a ranch. I don't know if it was Wyoming or Montana or something like that. It's set at a ranch, and there are some like little dramatic pieces that are happening. And so it definitely gave me the Yellowstone vibes. And the main male character in this is totally a Rip. Like he is Rip. So if you watch Yellowstone and you love Rip, you would probably love this book. Okay, the next book that I read was called All Duke and Bothered by Mariah Stone. This one I gave a 3 out of 5 on the stars and 1 out of 5 on the spice. This one's a historical romance, and it follows Penelope, who has a dream to never get married and support her family with her talent of art. Her father, however, has other plans for her and ends up arranging a marriage with a duke who seems to not even want to be in the same room as her. She's trying to figure out why he can't stand the sight of her, and he's determined to make sure she never figures it out. Okay, so this one, the reason why it's a 3, I tend to be like a solid 4. I'm pretty easy to please when it comes to romances, but this one I just felt like I got whiplash almost, because there's a lot happening and the emotional response from both of the characters was really all over the place. Like, I felt like it was incredibly conflicting. I really enjoy like the grouchy male character thing. Like, that's one of my favorite things, but I just couldn't enjoy it as much with this one because I felt like the female's response to when he was being grouchy was just all over the place. There's like a mystery happening in the background that carries on into other books in this series, so I did continue on. We'll talk about the other book after. I'm glad I did, because I think it was just these characters that were off for me, and the other characters that are in the background on this one I end up enjoying a little bit more as I carry on. All right, the next book that I read was called Bridesmaid for Hire, and it was from one of my favorite authors, Megan Quinn. This one I gave a 4.5 out of 5 on the stars and a 2 out of 5 on the spice. Okay, this one follows Maggie, who owns her own event planning business and focuses on weddings. She happens to find out that the very powerful Hopper family is on vacation as well on the island, and she sees it as an opportunity to try and get in their good graces to expand her business. She's trying to figure out an in when she happens to see her brother's best friend, who she's hated for years, and she decides to take advantage of that connection to meet with the family. All right, here's the thing. I was not sure if I wanted to even read this book, because what had happened was these characters were already in another book of Megan Quinn's, which I found to be odd. I just found it to be odd, because Megan Quinn's books are always happily ever after, but it confused the heck out of me when I was reading that book that these characters were already dating in that one, because I knew their book hadn't happened yet. So it kind of just threw me off, and it made me kind of not want to read this one. But then I think that I didn't have anything else going on, so I was like, you know what, let me go ahead and read it, and it ended up being awesome. Megan Quinn, she is a sorcerer. I don't care what anyone says. She puts something in her writing that I'm just like drugged when I'm done reading it. She is so funny. Like, you will be cackling, you will be laughing out loud. She is just so funny. The shenanigans that she comes up with, I should be kind of concerned for her mental stability, but we've met me and we know that I'm also crazy. So me and her are probably soulmates. The thing with this one, and it happens a lot with some Megan Quinn books, and that's why I almost never have like a total 5-star, is that it always is super good at the beginning. Then it loses me a little bit towards the middle, but then the second half of this book ends up recovering in the biggest way and ended up just really wowing me. I will say, if you're not into spicy romance, I gave this one a 2 out of 5 on the spice factor, because they are a little bit more on the riskier side for the spicy scenes, but there's not much plot that happens during those scenes, so it would be easy enough to skip over if you're not into it. But overall, I love Megan Quinn. I just think she is such a talented writer, and I would definitely recommend this one. All right, the next book that I read was called What I Should Have Said by Max Monroe. This book, you guys, it was a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and it was a 1 out of 5 on the spice. Here's the thing. If you've ever read Max Monroe before, they're very like laugh out loud, shenanigan, comedy, entertaining, chaotic energy. Like, that's the vibe of Max Monroe. This one decided to serve some emotional trauma on the menu as well. I was not expecting it. I was taken aback, but it was handled so beautifully. The writing was absolutely phenomenal. It was so good. So this one follows Nora, who's a runaway bride that runs to her estranged sister's house because she has nowhere else to go. And her sister makes it very clear that if she's going to stay with her, it's going to be temporary. So she needs to find a job. The only job in the little town that they're in happens to be for the grouchy guy who doesn't want to be around her. So like I said, this book it featured all of the things that I always expect from Max Monroe, which is like chaos, entertainment, laugh out loud moments, quirky characters. Like they nail it at that. But then it added in that layer of, like I said, emotional trauma, because there was some like heart-wrenching moments in this book. There's a very sensitive topic happening. I would recommend looking up trigger warnings before proceeding. There's actually like 2 trigger warnings, I would say, or 2 trigger topics maybe. But I just felt like they wrote it in such a beautiful way. It was navigated just so beautifully. I loved this book. It's probably one of my favorites from them, and it's something that I would definitely recommend if you're looking for something that goes a little bit deeper than a typical romance. Okay, so the next book that I read, it wasn't actually a book, it was a series, and I'm just rating it as an entire thing because you could not start one without just finishing the entire series. This was the Mind F series by S.T. Abbey. 5-star for me. And I would say the spice is probably like a 1.5 out of 5. You guys, okay, so this follows Lana, who is determined to right the wrongs of her past. She's out on a revenge mission and happens upon an FBI agent that could ruin everything for her. Okay, let me start by saying, this one is probably considered like maybe dark romance, but for me it was more like on the thriller suspense side. Has a little bit of a cold case vibe to it. If you happen to be a fan of Law & Order SVU or Criminal Minds, you would probably love these books as much as I did. They're definitely on the dark and twisty side, so if you're not into sensitive topics, just stay clear because there's definitely some very sensitive topics happening in this, and I would 100% make sure you look up trigger warnings before proceeding. But if you are able to handle it, oh my goodness. It's been a while since I read something that just completely sucked me in the way these books did. And it was so different from, you know, like a historical fiction sucking me in. It felt very different from other thrillers. I don't know. It was like I didn't want to put it down, but it wasn't too heart racing. It was more on the suspense side than the thriller side. There's also not much like horror to it until like towards the end. There is a little bit of a gory feel to it. So just be advised that that does end up coming up. I was in like a book hangover for a couple days after reading this because it was that good. It was really, really that good. The books are only about 100 to 125 pages each. If you're anything like me though, you're going to fly through them. I just felt like every word was utilized to the max in these books. Like it just felt like there was no filler. There was no nonsense. There was no like overdoing a background story or anything like that. I felt like the suspense pieces were just chipped away a little bit at a time, and layers were revealed to you as you go in just the most amazing timing. So could not recommend this series more if you are a fan of thrillers, suspense, and you're okay with a little bit of gore and sensitive topics. All right, the next book that I read was The Quit List by Katie Bailey. This isn't one that I've heard a lot of people talk about. I gave it a 4 out of 5 on the stars and 0 out of 5 on the spice, so it is a closed door romance. So this one follows Holly, who has spent her time pining for somebody else that she went to college with and now works for, and has finally realized that he's never going to be into her. She's on a string of bad dates when a handsome bartender comes over to rescue her, and she realizes that he is the perfect person to be her dating coach. Okay, this was like quintessential cheesy rom-com, and if you're in the mood for that, I would 100% recommend this book. Very predictable. The dating coach thing, you obviously knew they were going to fall in love, but I just felt like it was really like fun. It was flirty. It felt like the connection was really building in a very authentic way. Even if you generally like spicy romances, I don't feel like you're going to think there was anything lacking here in terms of the chemistry. At least I personally didn't. And so the only reason why this wasn't a 5-star for me is because the male character in this book is coaching the female character, and he's encouraging her not to lower her standards and not accept certain things from the guys that she dates. But then once their feelings start to evolve for one another, he's kind of delivering those same qualities to her. But then after being like, well, I told you I wasn't the guy for you. And it was just kind of annoying because it's like, okay, then don't be that guy, or like let her actually go be with the other guys that she's trying to be with. The author ends up working through it in a way that was redeemable. Part of it was kind of like frustrating to me, so just worth mentioning. But other than that, if you don't get all nitpicky about it like I did, you would probably love this book. I just thought it was really cute, really fun. All right, the next book that I read was called Royal Gone Rogue by Emma St. Clair, and this one I gave a 3.5 out of 5 on the stars. 0 out of 5 on the spice, so it is a completely clean romance. And this is book number 2 to the royally rearranged book that I read earlier in this, well, I didn't read it in this video, but talked about earlier in this video. So this one follows Philip, who's the older brother of the guy in the first book who decided not to be with the betrothed best friend. I don't know, hopefully that all made sense. And his mother has been pressuring him to find a wife because his father, the king, has some health concerns. So he decides to develop a dossier of admirable traits for his future wife, and one of his advisors presents a woman that meets all of the traits that he's looking for, and he heads off to a little village in Italy to try and convince her to come be the future queen. One of my least favorite tropes is like the insta-love, meet-cute type books, and this one is definitely high on that, but I will say for an insta-love situation, this is probably one of the better ones. I felt like it was really fluffy, it was really sweet, it was like a quintessential royal romantic comedy where like the royal person finds a commoner and all of that good stuff. There's definitely some like heart-wrenching moments. There's some moments when I felt really emotionally connected to the female main character. I also felt like the setting for both the Italy countryside and also the royal, what it's like a fake made-up country, I felt like the descriptions were so beautiful that I could really sink into both of the settings. I think that this would be a good one if you need like a palate cleanser and you just need something fluffy and fun. It was cute, wasn't anything that I'm like you need to run out and go read it, but I'm glad that I read it, so maybe you would enjoy it as well. All right, the next book was called Fangirl Down by Tessa Bailey. This one I gave a 4.25 on the stars and a 1 out of 5 on the spice. Here's the thing, Tessa Bailey, if you haven't read Tessa Bailey and you want to get introduced to spicy romance, a lot of people start with Tessa Bailey, and there's a lot of people that are like hardcore fans of Tessa Bailey. Like she can do no wrong in your eyes. I'm somewhere like in between. Like I enjoy her books, but I'm not like, she's not one of my top authors. I'd say she's like in the top 15. I've read a lot of her books, but she's not consistent to me. So she's not like one that I'm like, I have to rush out and read everything she writes. But her Christmas book, Wreck the Halls, ended up completely knocking my socks off. I was totally surprised. So when I saw Fangirl Down had come out, I was like, okay, I want to read it. This one follows Wells, who was previously at the top of the golf game, but over the past few years, he's really had a fall from grace, and he was so arrogant and obnoxious that all he has left in life is one single fan, and he has found a way to push even her away. He decides to convince her to come on tour with him to try and resuscitate his career. Okay, so here's the thing. This is a golf romance. Okay, I don't think I've ever read a golf romance. I don't think I would ever pick up a book that was about golf, but I ended up loving it because it wasn't super heavy on the golf, but there was enough sprinkling in there that I felt like I was getting something that was a little bit different than what I usually read in like a sports romance. So I really enjoyed that part. I also absolutely loved the main character, Josephine. She actually has type 1 diabetes, and I felt like the way the author explores that entire journey, the way that she navigates that was just done so well. I was completely impressed by it. I just absolutely loved it. She had a great balance of talking about the challenges and also overcoming what people expect of her and proving how strong she really is. And just overall, that female main character, to me, the word resilience just comes up because I just felt like she was such a resilient character, and I loved it so much. I loved the way the love story built up in this one because it felt like it was rooted in friendship, because they were basically strangers, and so it was like they first had to develop a good friendship with one another, and then a little bit of flirtation comes in, and then like more of a connection comes in. I felt like the spicy scenes were done incredibly well, and it reminds me of why so many people love Tessa Bailey. All right, the next book that I read was called Her Rake Fiancé by Mariah Stone, and this one was the second in that series from All Duke and Bothered that I talked about earlier. This one I gave a 4 out of 5 on the stars and 1 out of 5 on the spice. So this one follows Jane, who's finally living out her dream of providing an education to children in need, but her brother is insistent upon getting her back in the good graces of polite society, and he is approached by somebody who has a title that would be perfect for an arranged marriage with his sister, and he happens to need information from him. Okay, so for this one, I loved the mystery and suspense that's happening with one of the background characters that's explored in this book. I really enjoyed all of the different elements of that and how it was kind of worked through in this book, more so than in the first book. But I will say this one is heavy on both miscommunication and misunderstanding. And I think with miscommunication and misunderstanding in books, for it to be that good level of angst and not like the frustrating side, you have to have a valid enough reason for the miscommunication and misunderstanding to be happening. And I didn't feel like this book had that. The language in this book, though, was so romantic and so well done. I felt like the chemistry and the connection between the characters was just very swoony. So I'm excited to continue reading on in this series because I'm also hooked in to see what happens with the mystery that's happening in the background. All right, we got 2 more books to go. So the next one was a thriller. This one was Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll, and this one I gave a 4 out of 5 on the stars. There's no spice per se, but there are some sensitive topics on this one, so I would look up trigger warnings before proceeding. Essentially, this one is inspired by a real-life serial killer, but it more focuses on the women that he impacted with his actions. Okay, this one, if you're into like true crime documentary style reading, this probably would be a 5-star for you. I just am more of like the fast-paced thriller type of girl. However, I didn't want to put this down, but I also didn't really ever get fully captivated by it. I don't know how to explain that. I was talking to one of my friends about it because she loves thrillers, and that was like the best way I could describe it. Like, it didn't captivate me, but I also didn't want to put it down. So I don't know. It's very detailed in the writing. There's not a lot of dialogue, and I'm usually like the type that I like heavier on the dialogue. What I loved about this, though, was I felt like it was so refreshing because it does not glorify the serial killer himself. In the book, it's specifically talking about a prolific serial killer, but she refuses to even name him. She just calls him the defendant throughout the entire book, which I just thought was very different. It was unique. I thought it was refreshing because the entire book more focuses on the women and their lives and basically how the system can let us all down. So I thought that was a very refreshing take for a thriller, but there was enough action in it to really keep you hooked in going through those motions. There are 2 point of views happening, and there's like 2 timelines happening, but they're kind of popping in and out of the timeline when you're in a different point of view. So like there's female A, female B. When you're in female A, she might be in 1978, but it pops forward to present day. It pops backward to like 1969. And then like, it was just kind of like a little jarring for me while I was reading it. But overall, if you happen to be a true crime fan, I have a feeling that you would absolutely love this book. All right, the next book that I read was The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. This one's a memoir. I generally give ratings to memoirs. I usually do. I know some people don't. I usually do because I think like the quality of writing and how captivating something is, you can rate that. This one, I don't feel comfortable giving a star rating. And the reason why is because I just wish this book didn't exist yet. Obviously, her decisions have been taken away from her enough over the years, but for me, I just would like to read a book from her when she's had more time to heal from everything that she's gone through. It probably was therapeutic for her to write this, so I'm happy that she did for her. I'm happy she got to do that, but I think that the people that were involved with this took advantage of a situation, and they rushed a book out to presses that needed to be more developed in terms of the quality of writing. Like maybe she writes this book now and then 5 years from now writes another one, but the people that were involved with this release, I think they should have taken more responsibility because clearly she's not a established author. She's not a publisher. She's not an editor. So I wish that the people that were involved in this process really took their role a little bit more seriously because this book was pretty rough. Like it felt like you were reading like a blog post or something. I just think that the editing process could have been done much better. And I think that it's an important story that she's sharing, and I think that it deserved more time spent to really condition it, if that makes any sense. But overall, it was as wild as you might expect it to be. Reading some of the things that Britney goes through on a personal level, on a professional level, just everything, it just makes me feel for her. So I'm just hoping that the days ahead bring her peace and joy and she finds a healing way forward, because the things that she's gone through, nobody should have to go through in life. So anyways, that was kind of a depressing way to end my book wrap up, but those are all the books that I read in the month of April. Lots of good ones. I'm really excited. There was barely any, I think I had like 1 3-star. Everything else was 4-star and above, so that was exciting. Now let's talk about some of the books that I plan to read in the month of May. So this is what I'm doing. I don't know if you guys have done this, but I use the app Libby. If you're not using the app Libby, you are missing out if you're into reading like digital books. I used to be a physical book girly through and through, but once I had kids, just reading on a Kindle is way more convenient. But Libby is basically, you can get your library card from your local library and you can upload it in the Libby app, and then you can check books out from their digital catalog. There's usually like a wait though. So if you go on and request a popular book, say like Fourth Wing, there's probably going to be like a 16-week wait, depending on your library. Some's longer, some shorter. What I've been doing is I request a bunch of books as I know that I want to read them, and then it'll come up and be like, okay, this is available for you to read. And then what I'll tend to do is, because I have so many other books that are like in my queue, I push it out and I'm like, no, deliver it to the next person and bring it back to me. And then I just keep doing that over and over and over again. Well, one of my friends committed to, she's not going to do that anymore. She's going to accept all of her Libby holds that are coming through, and she's going to read them. I have so many that what I decided to do was I will either accept the hold and read the book, or I will let it go and I'll just stick it on my GoodReads want to read, because I've been using Libby almost as my like, I want to read this book, but I'm not in the position to read it right now type thing. So from now on, it's either read it now, Cait, or let it go. So these are the books that I have coming through that I will be reading in the month of May, hopefully. The first one is called, you're going to laugh at me, but it's called The Argument Hangover. I don't know what it is, but I really enjoy reading books that kind of talk about deepening relationships and developing healthier relationships. I just think that no matter where you are in your relationship, it's always helpful to develop different techniques, especially when it comes to communication. So I'm interested to read that. The next one is called One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I doubt I'm saying that correctly. It's supposed to be like kind of like a fantasy book, so we'll see how I feel about that, because I'm not the hugest fantasy reader. The next one is Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I've heard that's really good. Have you read it? If you have, let me know down below. Is that going to be a good one for me? I've liked Ali Hazelwood in the past. The cover on that one is throwing me a little bit, I'm not going to lie. So I'm a little bit nervous, but we'll see. The next one is from Brandon Sanderson, and it's called Mistborn. It's supposed to be a really good fantasy. Again, I'm not usually a fantasy reader, but I'm trying to just explore my options. The next one is 7 Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. I've read a couple books from her and I've loved her, so I'm excited to read that one because I've heard that one's really good. Another one I'm really excited about is Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver. It's supposed to kind of be like a Dexter situation. I never watched Dexter, but after reading the Mind F series from St. Abbey, I'm hoping this is kind of in that vibe. Okay, and then a few other books that I have is A Well-Trained Lady by Jess Heilman. I'm very sad because this will be the last book of hers that I have not read. So I've read through all of her work, at least her published work that I can find access to. I know she has another one releasing in June, so it won't be too long until I get another one from her, but I'm excited to read that. Another one was Until It Was Love by Pippa Grant. I just love Pippa Grant, so I'm excited to dive into that one. Oh, I lied to you. I have another one, Somewhat of a Ruse, but this one is a novella by Jess Heilman. That will be the last from her catalog that I have not read. Almost Him by S.M. Shade. That was available for free on Kindle one day. She posted it on her Instagram, so I grabbed it. I love S.M. Shade, so I'm excited to dip into that one. I have been trying this book called Sovereign by Raya Morris Edwards for a while. I'm like halfway through. I just can't get into it. But it's like a mountain romance situation, like Mountain Man style romance, and people keep saying it's amazing, so I'm hoping at some point things are going to change for me, but I've just been reading a couple chapters at a time between other books and just trying to get through it. I'm going to continue on in that series by Mariah Stone. The next book is called Project Duke, so I hope to read that. I also had started the book The Change Up by Megan Quinn. I only got about a quarter of the way through it and I just was not into it. And so I wanted to kind of take some space from it, but I'll probably either finish it up this month or just let it go. And then another book that everybody keeps saying I should read, and I'm nervous to start because I heard it's just going to suck the life out of me, is Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. If you've read it, please let me know. Please let me know. Also, can you just let me know, is it a happily ever after or is it not? Because I generally need a happily ever after. I can go through the motions to get there, even if I'm like, you know, even if things get a little crazy in the middle. All right, so that is everything that I read in the month of April, everything I plan to read in the month of May. But knowing me, I'll be distracted by a million shiny books and I'll end up reading other things as well. Thank you guys so much for being here today, for spending a little bit of your time with me. I hope I delivered whatever you needed when you clicked on that thumbnail. I hope you walk away with some book recommendations so you can find your next great read. And I hope you have a magical day. Bye.